My name's Alex York. I've founded a company called Atelier York about just less than 4 years ago. There's quite a few familiar faces in the crowd, but for those of you who don't know me, I run a small studio in West London. It's effectively just me, but I scale things up and down as needed when bigger and smaller projects come in. And my talk today is going to focus largely around a big project which at one time there were 3 of us working on it. And a general focus of the talk is also about big projects for small studios. And that project was the sort of project that should really have been done by a studio of 5, 10, 20 people, and was taken on by me and one other really. And how we managed to make that work as a workflow, and just about avoided some insanity after 4 years. So I should say a big thank you to the camera, which is going to be acting as bluegfx. Thank them for asking me to come and talk. And they're my software provider, and I'm not ashamed to say that they supply most of what you see on that list. Fairly standard stuff in the architecture world. I mean, I presume most of you are in the architectural visualization industry. Is anyone not? Good, that's cool. And I'm going to presume that basically everyone uses Macs, pretty much. How many? Sorry?
Not exclusively.
No, yeah. What else do you use? Lightweight. Okay, that's cool. Yeah, I mean, we're in this industry. If you don't have Macs available as a tool, then you're going to be in trouble when it comes to working with other studios. If you're working by yourself, then it's fine, but that's going to be really tricky, because even with the best intentions, you're always going to need to collaborate with other studios, even if it's just sharing assets. And that kind of leads on from the talk that we just heard earlier, which is really interesting to hear about, Interop and how they share assets as well. I don't only work exclusively for my own clients. I do work with other studios when things are either a bit quiet or big projects have just finished, and they will often call me up and see if I'm available just as a regular freelancer. And it's nice to be able to jump around and help other studios out. We share work between each other, and every now and again a big job will come in to me, and I'll call up another studio and say, do you want to help out, or perhaps do you want to take it on? I'm too busy. So it's nice being able to work with one another like that. So here are a few examples, and there's a big disclaimer. There's no colour management on this machine, and it's not my machine. So the colours are completely wacky, very, very oversaturated, a bit green. So you're going to have to forgive me for that. And just go on the website if you want to have a look at how they really ought to look. So these are a few examples. We mainly use Mental Ray. And I'm going to say, how many of you guys are V-Ray? Yeah, everyone. How many of you use Mental Ray primarily? A lot more than I expected. Good for you. No, the Chaos guys are here, and I'm not supposed to be selling V-Ray, but I have just got V-Ray as another tool in my arsenal. And, this was done in V-Ray, and you'll be seeing many more examples of stuff I've done in Mental Ray. I think the whole argument is a nonsense a lot of the time, and whatever you want to use is fine. I imagine there are quite a few students here. When people are telling you you must use V-Ray, you must use Max, you must use this, whatever gets the job done, that's all it comes down to really. Sometimes V-Ray will be better suited to some things, and sometimes Mental Ray will be just fine. The main reason why I started out as purely Mental Ray, and it was only recently that I've started using V-Ray and Max as well, and I-Ray and all sorts of other things, is the cost. When you're starting out as a freelancer, has anyone just started out as a freelancer and trying to set up shop on their own? Or about to? Cool. Yeah, well the cost is just horrendous. You've got hardware and software and all the other things that go along with it, and it's pretty daunting. So when you're trying to work out which path you want to take, you need to make a lot of consideration into it, and obviously the less money you have to spend the better, but it can save you money in the long term if you can get renders out more quickly, and it's a big investment to think about. And so the main reason I was mainly Mental Ray is simply because it was free, and I've been using it for quite a while already. But as with all these things, all the renderers they're all doing the same thing, and in much the same way really. It's just slightly different techniques. So these are a few examples of a project for Ike from Barton Wilmore here. Fantastic architects. They work on a lot of absolutely epic master plans, and this is a recent one that we worked on. I think I'm not going to get too technical in this talk, but I think the max file for this site model was well over 2 gig, and it took forever to import and actually navigate, and we were crunching everything down to proxies, trying to get it all to work. Partly what I'm going to talk about today is workflow as well. I'll get a bit more into that later. This is another project for them, King Abdullah International Gardens. Absolutely enormous site. Yeah, this was another mental age job. Lots and lots and lots of properties, as you can imagine. I'll just skip through these. I would say the bulk of the work that we do is residential, high-end, luxury residential. It's not been something we've intentionally gone into, it's just worked out that way really, and it's something that I really enjoy because it allows us to get into the real details and furniture and artwork, and it's not just about the architecture, it's also interior design and photography. A lot of what we do is basically photography with a computer, and it's all photographically based as well. We use photographic exposure, photographic workflow for everything, photographically correct materials as much as possible, so that you're not trying to second guess how things are going to look too much of the time. Most of the time, you can get a good idea of how it's going to look before you've even hit render. When you've been working for so many years, in the same renderer, the same tools, your materials that you used on the previous project are going to work, so you just drop it in. Lots of ways to save a lot of time. I'll get into what kind of time saving things a bit later on. These are some more examples. Lots of interior design. A lot of these were generated as portfolio pieces about 3 or 4 years ago. And this is one that was completed recently for a private client. We just wanted to know what their kind of penthouse living and kitchen space was going to look like. So a relatively small project. I think we only had a day on each of these images, that was it, including modelling everything from scratch. So a lot of pressure, but again, leading on from what those guys were just talking about assets, building up a library, that's something that if you're starting out as a freelancer and opening up a new studio, building up an asset library that you can reuse, it's so worth spending that extra time making sure your assets are at the right scale and everything's spot on, so that the next time the job comes in, they go, right, you've got a day, rather than panicking and heading down the pub, you grab your assets and you can reuse things nice and quickly, and they're going to work, they're at the right scale, the pivots in the right place, all that kind of boring stuff that you need to get right. It will really save you time down the line. We do quite a lot of photo montage work as well, and this was for planning. A lot of almost all of what we do is for marketing, but we do planning work occasionally. This is a job down in Hammersmith. A fairly straightforward job. Architects are a bit of a pain, but that's often the case. This was one of the more challenging projects in that we only had a couple of days to do this, including modelling, but they needed it rendered at that, I think 40,000 pixels, which was just horrendous. So it was actually done in strips. It's just another quick workflow thing. And it's the main focus of this talk really is about a project which I have to honestly call The House. I'm still pretty much under NDA with it, so I can't really talk about I can't reveal the project name, where it is, who the architects are, who the client is. It's a house on Earth. That's all I can really say about it, unfortunately. It has gone through planning, so I mean, if you probably could find out more details about it if you like, but try not to tell anyone because it's Russian for fun. You don't want to get in trouble. So this is the film, which I'll talk about shortly afterwards. You'll recognise the music. So that was the film, a culmination of about 4 years of work, really, from start to finish. The animation side of things was about, it's kind of hard to say because the project was very much on and off, not least due to the fact that the client put the whole project on hold for a couple of months. But I would say probably about eight months pretty much of solid animation work, and about 3 years, just less than 3 years of work on stills leading up to that point. Go about showing you the process. It's kind of, in some ways it's very hard to remember what we did because it was 4 years ago, but the process of putting this together was that it was done in phases. So the initial phase was to produce stills for the client so that they could understand how their building was going to look and how to get from A to B, and that was the main focus of the animation as well, not to produce a kind of glossy architectural film with lots of interesting camera angles and, you know, birds flying and that kind of thing, which would have been nice to do. But it was very much a functional, this is what your house is going to look like. How do you get from A to B? How do I get from the, you know, the wine cellar to my Bugatti Veyron, which they own 4. That's how wealthy they are. It was a very functional piece of work, and getting the balance between something that looked glossy and interesting and captured the imagination, but also explained it clearly, and there weren't too many things to detract from, you know, what the house actually is, was really quite tricky. So our general process is pretty much as you might expect, really, and it ties in with this idea of a big project for a small studio. You know, obviously the scope of work, as far as I know, and I might be wrong on it, it was a 15-minute animation, and I think it might be one of the longest architectural films made in this country. I think it's certainly one of the longest anyway, especially by a studio of effectively 2 people. So how the hell do you take a job of that kind of scale, which would normally, you know, land in the lap of a studio that's 5 or 10 or 20 strong? How do you make that work when it's only one, 2 or 3 of you at a time? One of the main ways of doing it, and what we did, was to divvy up the workload into very clearly planned phases. So the first phase was to model the main structure of the house and not worry too much about the details. Once that was then nailed down and signed off by the architects, it was very important that it was signed off first so that they couldn't start going back and changing things down the line. We then moved on to internal details, furniture, lighting, fixtures and fittings, purely still white rendered. And so this is a typical example of what we might have after going down a couple of those phases. So we've gone down through the main structure of the space to the internal details, and then we're going to be moving on to, you know, a very rough initial pass for rendering materials. At this point, they still don't know what all the materials should be, because they were designing this on the fly, pretty much, as we were doing it. The external part of the house had obviously gone through planning, so it was fixed, but the interior was being designed effectively based on what we were showing them. So they would come and say to us, you know, we want a tapenaki table, you know, that Japanese food, something I think it's Japanese. We want something like that, and everything else to be kind of stainless steel and wood and that kind of mixture. And we would put this together as a kind of, well, this is what we reckon it might, you know, could look nice. And they would come back and say, make it all stainless steel, you know, take the interesting colour out, the you know, the cookers and stuff like that. The usual process of going through and refining a space. And then we then go back and refine everything. You know, we noticed that the grain on the steel work was a bit too fat, so we thinned it out, up the render quality. This is only very low res preview. It's about upping the quality, adding the kind of glows and the usual kind of finesse, you know, depth of field, very, very subtle effects, cleaning up any noise, things like that. And quite a large number of the shots in the final piece. And that was only a highlights reel, by the way, because it's only 5 minutes long. The final piece that we put it together with all the stills would be something like 25 minutes long. It's ridiculous. There were a good deal of stills within it that were then animated with hands and things like that, which is obviously crucial to saving time. I think in total it's something like 6 minutes of actual animated stuff, 7 minutes. Everything else is stills. So that's a general process, and I'll now go through and show you in a bit more detail each type of part of the process. So this is, you might recognise it as the wine cellar. This is a typical first pass of the model that we would do. And again, bits and bobs of furniture have started to appear. What I did was I was concentrating on, well, we initially sent the modelling work out, outsourced it to a company in China, and thinking even if it came back a bit rough, it would still be useful. Not a good idea. It looked fine, but the more we examined the details, the more errors we found, and it got to a point where we thought it's going to be quicker and cheaper just to scrap it and start again. So it was a bit of a waste of money and time, really. Although it did give us a good overview of what the house should look like, roughly. So it was useful in that respect, I think. But you live and learn, I think, from mistakes like that. But what we did was we divvied it up. So I was working primarily on furniture and lighting. My partner, David Connolly, who's not here, from a company called Insightful Light, another biz firm. He was working mainly on the interior design of the model and the actual structure of the house. And we kind of started pulling everything together and making it work that way. So I think it can work. When there's only two of you, it's going to be more efficient, I think, to have one person working on one type of thing. So you want one person working on the structure, one person working on furniture, one person working on lighting, because it's, they're in the kind of zone of doing furniture and, soft modelling. And you don't want to be jumping between too many different types of things, I think, when you're on such a relatively tight deadline. So this is the initial task, getting the main structure of the spaces right. There's bits and bobs of furniture, but not much really. We then get into detail type modelling, and this is quite far down the line, but still in the modelling. We use all sorts of plugins and scripts to get the job done. We use a plugin called Grassomatic to generate grass, unsurprisingly. I don't know if anyone's used that. It's just brilliant. It's probably the best grass generation plugin you can get. It's very hardcore, as in it will generate a lot of geometry if you wanted to, but you can strip it right back. We needed a lot of detail, because that shot where you're flying up over from the pool into the gym, you're going right past the grass, and you might as well crank it up because you're going to notice it otherwise. But you can crunch it right back down to simple levels and then make proxies out of it and scatter it around and do what you need to get your memory management working nicely. We also used other things like the stone placement tools script, which is a great script for just making brick walls and stone blocks, which was really useful in generating that funky wall going down the swimming pool. Any ways you can find to speed up the process. Why do it by hand when you can fire up a script, punch in a few numbers, and get something out. And of course, everyone's favourite, the Ivy generator, or GWIV, as I think everyone uses these days. It's just incredible. I think we use it on pretty much every project that can have some Ivy in it. It's a great way of filling up walls and big concrete walls that look a bit boring, and the architects haven't specified anything. Stick some Ivy on it. I love it. So those are some examples of some of the kind of more interesting detail type things and things involved with plugins. Now lighting, as I said earlier, we use a completely photographic workflow when appropriate, which is about 95% of the time. So we use photometric lights, photometric strip lights and spotlights, and real exposure values, real physical cameras. We use OpenEXR, 32-bit usually, 16 is fine most of the time, so that we can play around with exposure values, and we treat it very photographically. One example of where we fudged something was when we were doing caustics, and it's just a simple light with a projected caustic map, which is made using a caustic generator. I don't know if anyone's used that. It's a massive lifesaver when it comes to generating faked caustics. You don't need to be using real caustics. Most of the time, no one will know the difference. Very rarely, anyway. So you just project the map up into the room, and it just looks great. And it takes milliseconds to render because it's effectively a kind of scan trick. So as I say, everything else is done using photometric spotlights. Some with IES files, but most of them were just tweaked so that we could play around with it. We did have a very strict specification for the lighting. The actual light fixtures and fittings were modeled, which I'll show you in a second. You can actually you'll see each individual light fixture. One thing that we found in Mental Ray, and you know, we're all Vero guys, that's fine. Speculate Mental Ray is crap. It's really bad, and you'll get speckles and fireflies and all sorts of things. There are ways around it, but they will be tearing your hair out. I wrote a little script that disabled specular on all the scene lights. It took a couple of minutes to write it, and I just ran it, and all the speckles and issues disappeared. And some people will say it's a bit of a fudge, but you know what, it worked, so whatever works at the end of the day. I think you get the same issue in V-Ray and other renderers too, when you get materials that are pushing pixels out that are way too bright. It's always a problem. And people always tell you, well, you need to tweak your materials, get everything perfect, but a lot of the time you don't have time. You know, a 2-minute script is going to be better than tearing your hair out for 2 hours or 2 days. So that's an example of one of the light sources that we modelled. You know, it looks fairly low poly, but obviously, you know, the animation is done at 720p, so it doesn't need to be much higher poly than that. And it's got chrome reflected interior as it would in real life. So anything that's reflecting it will reflect it as it would in real life. So there's no need for specular. The specular is just a fudge reflection. If you're reflecting the real light source, then you don't need specular, so it's kind of a waste of time anyway. And one dilemma that we did have though was that the client didn't want to see the light sources. So we had to kind of play them down a lot of the time, which doesn't really help. The next phase was going through the animatic and animation, and this was obviously happening in the background as well. You know, this is one of the first things that we were given, but we didn't start addressing it in much detail until this point. Most of the animation was guided by the architects, not by the client. The client simply wanted to see everything. The project was broken into 2 clear phases. The first part of the animation, which would be about 7 minutes, was all the main spaces. So, you know, the entrance shots, the living rooms, bedrooms, the stuff they're going to be using all the time. That massive library, map room, things like that. All the really interesting stuff. And then the second phase of the animation was all the rest that they needed to see, didn't really care about. So all the hallways, about 100 bathrooms. I think at least 10 bathrooms. We went bathroom crazy by the end of the 3rd month. And all the kind of secondary spaces, basically. But the architects did specify pretty much exactly what they wanted to see. But you can see classic cases of, you know, you come in and look left and right. You know, that's what the architects are looking for. In reality, you'd never do that. It would look ridiculous. So, you know, you work out different ways of doing it. So this ended up being a guide, which we then worked from quite closely in order to get to where we needed to be in the end. So these are a few examples of the sorts of shots. Some of them made it into the highlights reel, some of them didn't. If anyone wants to see the animation again, come find me afterwards and I'll show you. So you can see the kind of detailed shots, or have a look at it on the website, it's all there. I mean, this is a typical shot where, rather than, they wanted to see 3 spaces, but rather than have 3 shots, you know, which they initially said, yeah, just have 3 shots, we said, let's just do it in 1 shot. In some ways it makes it a lot harder for you, because you've got 3 times as much to get right in one go, and you don't want to make any rendering cock-ups, because it will affect, you know, 30 seconds of footage rather than 5. But in the other hand, once you've got everything set up and working, if you know it works, you can send it off to render and you've got 3 shots done in one go. So it worked out really well in the end. You know. And some of the more complicated shots were really quite tricky, and we managed to convince them out of doing a lot of the time-lapse stuff, which, you know, anyone that works with GI and things like that will know it's really tricky, because you need photo maps for each frame, interpolate it, it's really tricky. We had one time-lapse in that animation, which we did at the end after the project was finished, actually, which we thought would be quite a nice addition to it, but it wasn't commissioned. Materials, again, photographically based where we could, but with, I don't know, anyone use Arrowway textures? Pretty much. I would hope everyone really, but just the best textures in the world. You know, concretes and woods, you just can't really get better, really. All the texturing work and materials are really dead simple. Nothing funky in there at all, really. The Val's quartzite, which you can see here in the pool, was done using random material IDs. Quite a common trick with, I think we had 10 different variations of the texture, so that you can scatter it across the different elements. But apart from that, there's nothing too complicated going on in there really. It's all, you know, cream render, white render. The more complicated ones, such as the wood and the bronze, were tricky. I mean, as you can see in that animation, there was an awful lot of glossy reflection stuff going on. Mental Ray does not like glossy reflections. I don't think V-Ray does either, to be fair, but it was a real pain trying to get the render times to an acceptable level. Obviously, when you've not got an in-house render farm, you know, I think at the peak we had 6 workstations, a couple of 1U nodes, and we were still really struggling. So we ended up using Render Nation. I don't know if there's a couple of guys from Render Nation here today. We should go and speak to them. For external rendering work, they're really fantastic. They'll sort you out at 11:30 at night when you've got something. Not that we did. Yeah, so rendering was obviously a huge concern. Trying to, you know, some scenes would take 5 minutes to render, and some would take an hour. And we needed to spend some serious time optimizing all the models, textures, lights, getting everything down so that it still looked good, but rendered in an acceptable amount of time. Some of the nice tricks for that were limiting the reflection distance for the wood, for instance. So anything beyond a couple of meters was just going to reflect grey, black, or blue if it was reflecting the sky. You know, why bother reflecting something real when you're never going to notice it's going to be so blurry? And that literally, that's some of the shots up in the gym were an hour, and then using that method went down to about 15 minutes a frame, from an hour a frame. Huge time saver just by checking the box. You know, you discover these things as you're going along. And yeah, turning off reflectivity for the floor, sometimes you just don't notice it. Even though in a still, there's no way you wouldn't have it on. Even if it was a kind of very subtle static finish or even a matte finish, you'd have something. But in an animation context, if you're going through a hallway in 5 seconds, you're going to be looking at the walls and the furniture. You're not going to be looking at it. So why bother? Bump maps, didn't use bump maps really, hardly anything anyway. You know, we faked bump mapping by painting it into the diffuse map a lot of the time. Because bump mapping, you can double your render time. It's such a simple old rendering technique. People just turn it on and think, yeah, it looks great, but actually you don't need it most of the time. You can turn down the blur value of your maps so that you get a sharp diffuse texture and it'll look virtually the same. So that's materials. Rendering and post-production was really quite straightforward. And I don't know if anyone read, I wrote an article for Ronan Beckerman's blog about this project. And one of the questions, it was a kind of critique really, was that we didn't really use passes for this project, which probably would surprise a lot of people. Passes are fantastic, 99% of the time. But sometimes, I mean, they're only there to save you time. So later on, if you need to tweak stuff, you can do it easily without having to re-render. But if you know you're not going to need to tweak anything because the architect has signed it off and it cannot change, I mean, you can't change it because if you do, you risk having to get comments from them again, and then you might end up having to go back to square one. If you know nothing's going to change and you're happy with it and they're happy with it, and it looks great out of the base render with a bit of colour correction, vignetting, depth of field, usual effects, why bother render out diffuse, shadow, reflection, specular, you know, just because it's there, even if it doesn't really add anything significant to your render times, and I think with V-Ray it's negligible, you're still dealing with 6 times as many 10 meg EXR files, and when a project is already clocking in at a couple of 100 gig, you know, that you're going to multiply that by 5 or 6 times, storage becomes a massive issue, and just pulling in all the files through After Effects, it all just grinds to a halt. What's the point if you can have it all in one base render and you know it looks good? And if you render to 16 or 32 with EXR, if something's overexposed, it doesn't matter, because you can just knock it back. You know, you draw a little mask, knock it back, blur it out, no one will know. This is an example of where that happened. That area there should be pure white, and it is in this image, but it was overblown in the base render. But the rest of the scene looked fine, everything else was fine, and you know what, we ran out of time. Why go into the max file and start tweaking lights? You know, it looked good enough everywhere else. Why not just draw a little mask, knock it back, and it looks spot on, and no one would know. And it saves a lot of time. Some of the shots, this one was the most complex shot by a long way. Many layers of fixed with all the best intentions in the world, you can spend, and I did spend literally weeks on this shot, this one shot. It was so complex and so many details and so many layers and effects. With all the best intentions in the world, there will always be something that goes wrong in the render. There's always an artifact, there's always something that pops, there's always something that just doesn't do exactly what you expect it to do. It did it for 200 frames, but then for the 10 frames there, it didn't do it, and it just draws the eye. And most of the time, the client won't notice or care, but you will, and you kind of take pride in it. You've worked for 4 years on a project, you want to get it right. And yeah, so there are patches and things like that. But, the majority of things in this After Effects file are effects and layers of more effects. The glows around here, glows around the candles. The candles flicker actually in the base render. Probably didn't notice it in that shot, but you do when you're told, and then you look at it and it actually does. Little glints along here because there's actually some water underneath these pebbles. Little details that the architects would not have signed the shots off if it wasn't there. The client would have noticed, but the architects would have done and did. So we had to get them right. It took an awful lot of time. But had we done that all in passes, it would have just multiplied the whole thing by 10. It would have been completely pointless. So having everything as a nice base beauty render, and then passes for additional details was the way forward. So yeah, I would just, next time you're doing particularly an animation project, I would just relax and kind of think twice before you start firing up 20, 30 V-Ray elements or whatever. You don't need them. All you're going to do is create work for yourself to sit down and composite, unless you start using render managers, in which case that might be easy. So here are some stills from the project. This is one of the ones that we first produced. I think it was about 3 years ago now. It's one of the first exterior shots. All the landscaping changed by the end, by the time we did the animation, but the actual house remained virtually the same. A lot of materials changed. These are some of the sort of high-res, high-detail stills. So obviously, huge amounts of vegetation detail. We used quite a bit of stock modelling, where why bother modelling an Acer tree when you could just grab one from TurboSteel or whatever else. We use Forest Pack Pro now. I don't know if anyone uses that. Forest Pack. It's really, really cool. If you're doing forest, and not just forest, but anything involving a large number of trees or veg, or even anything which involves scattering lots of the same objects that need to be slightly different, that's a brilliant plugin that I highly recommend. We use that now for this sort of project, but this was all done manually, kind of hand-placed, manually scattered. So these are some of the higher-res images that were produced for this project. Some of these, like this one, was produced after the main project for marketing purposes, really. And these are some of the final frames, the 720p frames from the final animation, which are up on the website, actually, if you want to have a look and have a look at the details. When it's whizzing past, you don't really notice it at all. It's, yeah. So that's an example of how the caustics, the faked caustics work. You can tell they don't look real there, and still in an animation context, that they more than do the job, I think. And these are some of the early marketing shots. I mentioned briefly at the start that the project was put on hold halfway through. What effectively happened was that the client had a freak out. Unfortunately, listened to one of their best friends who happened to be an interior designer, and that interior designer managed to persuade them to let him redesign the entire house. And this is after 3 years of development by the actually 4 years of development by the architects. I've been involved for 3 years, and the architects just tore their hair out and said, "Fine, let this person go and do it." And they came back and they were awful, which was just fantastic news, obviously. So we were all like, great, but we still needed to persuade the client that the architect's original interior design, which is this, was the way to go. And so they commissioned us to produce a couple of stills of this, the formal living room, as you can tell, very formal, and this, the informal living room, which is obviously a lot softer. You've got some music, piano, kind of classic furniture in there, a lot softer and more accessible. And they wanted to get an idea of the two different styles and working together with the same kind of themes. so these were used to convince the client to say, well, you know what, your design's great, off you go, and it worked. And you know, a couple of days later, we had the commission to produce the animation. So, and that's another one that was done to explain to the client how the main hallway worked with the actual space, very complicated space, cutaway. So, yeah, these are some more of the stills from the project. So if you want to see more, there are literally hundreds on the website of frames from the animation, lots and lots of shots that weren't in the highlights reel. Then have a look on the website or come and find me afterwards and I'll show you them. Otherwise, thank you very much for listening. And if anyone's got any questions, I think we're probably quite close to running out of time, but if anyone's got any questions.
What kind of rig did you use for some of the longer cameras?
What kind of rig?
Yeah.
What's in hardware?
No, in-maps.
Oh, right. Pretty much every camera move was done using Spline and what's it called? Spline constraint, path constraint on camera. So 0 rotations. I'd never ever go near rotation on a camera. It's a no-no for me. It's always easier to animate position. So we did that. Little tip: if you're animating a camera using a path constraint, we're getting a bit geeky here. What you'll need to do in order to introduce ease in and ease out on the path percentage is add a Bezier flow to the constraint. I can explain how to do that in detail later, but if you're ever wondering why your camera's like your percentage is 0 and then it goes up very linearly, you need to add some ease in and ease out to it. That's what you need to do. So yeah, pretty much every shot was done using path constraints. Yeah, all of them I think actually. And that path percentage with the Bezier float was used to slow things right down. That shot when you're going through the pool into the pool was 35 seconds long, I think. It was an immense shot, and in order to get that to work, we had to use the path percentage constraint so that we could slow things right down as you're coming around the corner, so there wasn't too much whipping action, because you're effectively going up that all the way down that corridor. And if you were doing that all at the same kind of speed, it would be horrible. And the same in that library shot, which only just works, but it's really, really tricky because you're going round 360 degrees and then spinning around back the other way. If you didn't slow that down at the right pace, it would be horrible. You get motion sickness. I hope that answers your question. Any more questions?
You mentioned that your client was, or you kind of got to a point where you had reached a point with your client or the architect where they weren't giving you any more feedback, so you could, that's the reason that you didn't employ passes. I'm just actually genuinely interested. How did you do that? Because I'd love to be able to do that.
It was a process of sending them so many drafts or visions that they, well, to go back to the beginning, as I kind of briefly mentioned at the start, that we didn't move on from one phase to the next until they were signed off. So we didn't move on from the structural modelling to the furniture modelling until they'd signed it off. So at no point, and they were very reasonable, because I'd known them for 3 years, they were very reasonable and understood that once they'd signed something off, that was it. There's no going back. So unless there's been a major problem, which didn't happen, because they're just very good architects. So we didn't progress to each next stage until everything was signed off. So when we got to, for instance, this point, or just before this point, there were no surprises from one draft to another. It was very much what they'd asked for and no more, apart from what we thought needed to be done to make it work visually. And so really, the final draft of this looked very similar to the first draft, because I'd been working for them for 3 years. I know what was in their head when they said make something brighter. I knew that half the time it didn't mean make it brighter, it meant make everything else darker. It's about perception. And I know if they draw a 4 metre long sofa on a plan, it doesn't exist, But they're in a rush, and I know what they meant. And when you get to know the architects that well, you can second guess what they mean. And it means that half the time you can actually ignore half their comments, which is great. And we were extremely fortunate that the client the end client was not involved at all for 6 years throughout the life of that project. They had, I think, half an hour where they flew from Russia or wherever to approve the design of the house with the architects based purely upon a couple of sketches, and said, yeah, carry on. And then 3 years later, then 4 years later, they got this and went, yeah, that's our house, thanks, build it. So we were very fortunate that they weren't involved. The architects were very involved and they knew what they were doing. You know, if they say put this here, it was for a bloody good reason. So we wouldn't do a render, send it to them, and then they would turn around and say, oh, actually, can you take it out because it looks a bit rubbish. They knew it would look good. So, but it's very, very rare you get client.
Yep.
It's extreme, as you know, I'm sure. We're holding on to them quite tightly. I think we're probably, unless there was any more.
Are there any third-party After Effects plugins that you use?
I think we used some evaluations for bits and bobs to try out, but in the end we just did it all manually. It was all done manually with rendering out matte channels, just simple black and white channels. For instance, in the trees, probably didn't spot it, but in the trees, yeah, in the trees there were little, glints going on and glows in here. That was just rendered by grabbing, it's full of spheres, render it out as white on black, and then just glow it and put it on his screen mode in After Effects. A lot. I would like to invest in, Sapphire and Magic Bullet and all those kind of really cool plugins. They are really cool. I think for a big studio it's a no-brainer, but when it's 1 or 2 of these, it's kind of too much of an expense at the moment. A lot of the time you don't need. You can do it with simple parts and the tools that are in the software. I think we're ready. Well, thanks very much. Unless there are any last questions.